And he has also served as a union minister in several roles, in commerce, in information technology, and many other ministerial posts, and has, to my mind, made some really taken some excellent initiatives in terms of the different kinds of work that he has done. If I started going into all of that, it would take us a long time, but we are delighted to have him with us today, and we would love to get his reactions on the elections which have just been completed in India. Some of you here in this room and online may have come to the event earlier this week where we talked to a bunch of academics and people from somebody from News Laundry in the media about their reactions. And so we would like Mr. Pilot's reactions as an insider, somebody who has been on the ground, done a lot of campaigning for the Congress Party and the India Alliance during these elections. So he really has a pulse of the country and what really went on in the ground, and also, of course, most importantly, how he sees these things now going forward, how he sees the next 5 years turning out and working out for India. I'm joined by my colleague, Maya Tudor, who was the one who initiated and conducted the earlier event this week. Dr. Maya Tudor is a political scientist also at the school, and she works on questions of nationalism and democracy, and she has done a lot of work on India as well. So without further ado, welcome. Thank you, Maya, for joining me today. And why don't I hand over to Mr. Pilot, and Maya, maybe you would like to ask the first question on the...
Yes, well, I think we should just hear, first of all, about the election. What were your reactions? What was surprising to you? Maybe you expected what the rest of the Indian public, and certainly the exit polls, did not. So can you just talk us through your own reactions to the elections and what you think they mean for India and the years ahead?
Great. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Anandi. Thank you all for coming here, and thank you both for organizing this event. Like you said, this election was a long election. It was 7 phases long. Mm-hmm. And at the outset, I really want to say that Indian elections are a phenomenal exercise because it's 960 million people who are eligible voters, and it's the largest planned human exercise on earth. The logistics itself, if you just think about it, it's a humongous operation where people, candidates, parties, voters actually use the democratic process to elect a new government. So it's a very, very tedious and a very, should I say, peak of summer. It's not the easiest thing to do. But I think every election, the Indian economy, Indian democracy gets more and more refined. And I say this because of the results itself indicate that we have a new government in place. But the elections threw up a fractured mandate. It was not a mandate for any political party to form a government. Mm-hmm. It is a coalition. It was a coalition of parties that are now formed a new government. So the results, I think, and you mentioned about exit polls, the less we speak about it, the better, because almost every one of them was wrong. And you said, if I had an inclination of what the results will be,
yes.
Well, I knew something has shifted, because for the last 10 years, we had a government that was doing a lot of propaganda, a lot of marketing, using the media, a lot of projection, I dare say even a lot of chest thumping. But the reality on the ground was a bit different in terms of job creation, in terms of what I feel is a big gap between the rich and the poor. That has widened a fair amount. And I think the agrarian distress, the dissatisfaction among young people, and not just unemployment, also underemployment. So a lot of these massive issues across the country that were there to see, but were being ignored for a long time. Mm-hmm. So this election has thrown up a government that is not a full majority government, which was the case for the last 2 elections. So it's interesting what will happen in the future. I don't know what will happen in the future, but we have 2 regional parties supporting the BJP, which has now formed a government for the 3rd time. Time will tell. Right now, it's just a few days since we have a new government. But just to remind you, both these allies of the BJP have been with the have been against the BJP in their previous avatars. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Naidu has been a part of India Alliance, sort of alliance before the elections. Mr. Nitish Kumar was actually the one who started the whole movement of getting India Alliance together. So they have known to
Ironically,
not stick around for very long. We'll see what happens. But interestingly enough, this election was a election that we, when I say we, my party and my alliance, India Alliance, we fought on issues we thought were pertinent to the people of India. Issues of inflation, joblessness. We had economic growth, but it wasn't well distributed. And we felt that there's been a policy initiation which is helping a few rather than helping the most. We also felt that the elections were held under an atmosphere where 2 elected chief ministers were detained and put in prison. There were a lot of questions raised about the transparency or the efficacy of the institutional bodies that we have. The Congress party, in the middle of elections, our bank accounts were seized. We had to go to the Supreme Court to get relief. So all these things were happening, which I think the voters of India were not very welcoming towards. And we saw that results on counting day on June 4th when the results started coming in. So it was an election that we thought our party and India Alliance fought on issues that were important. I have to say that the ruling dispensation was fighting elections somehow in the back of the mind, taking the voters for granted and assuming to get X number of seats. We have a house of 543. They were targeting 370, 400 and so on. So that open declaration was a sense of slight arrogance, which I think I could sense in the ruling party. And the results are what they are. But we have promised to the people of India that our issues will remain the same. We will fight for what we think is right, both inside the parliament and outside. And the India Alliance, which came about, it's not easy to yield space to another political party, which has been your rival for a long time. But we felt the need of the hour was the unity of opposition, and the Congress being the largest party, I think played a stellar role in being pivotal to the creation and sustainability of the India Alliance. So Alliance is here to stay. The government, I don't know. We'll have to see. It's 2 allies which have been quite temperamental in their attitude in previous governments. So we'll see what happens. So election was a spirited election. Many things were said and things were heard. But the people of India have voted, I think, in a very mature fashion. And the elections, you said about exit polls. Every political pundit, everyone who had any inclination of India was thinking, well, numbers are going to be X, Y, and Z. The numbers reflect the reality on the ground, and the Congress party actually has almost doubled its numbers from 50 odd to 100 plus now. And the BJP has come down from 303 down to 240. So they lost 70 odd MPs and we've gained about 60. So it's been a reversal in that sense. Well, let's see how the next 5 years pan out. If they are 5 years, it could be less, who knows.
I also, I know that, like you mentioned, you're the member of the Legislative Assembly in Rajasthan, and one of the things that is striking about Rajasthan is just a few months ago you had the state elections, and at which time the BJP sort of routed and your party and moved into power, and just 6 months later they have done really quite badly, and the India Alliance has come back in the state. And if I sort of zoom out as well and see this picture by looking at a few other states, I know that one big narrative which has been given is that, this is a vote against Modi. This has been said a bunch of times. But looking at the experience of Rajasthan and then thinking about some other states which, I won't go into a list of, but do you think that maybe this is an anti-incumbency phenomenon that we are seeing, or or do you think there's something else going on, different stories in different parts of the country?
It's true. We're a very large country, so you can't really generalize any one particular area. You spoke about Rajasthan. Rajasthan, well, BJP didn't sweep the elections. We got 70 odd MLAs, and BJP 100 odd MLAs, 120. So, and the vote share difference was about 1.5%. It wasn't that much. But what is now a popular word in India is this double engine, right? So you have these two
Double engine.
Double engine means state government is BJP and government of India is BJP. So they keep talking about the double engine everywhere. That didn't work very well in either Uttar Pradesh or in Haryana or in Rajasthan. And I kept saying this during the campaign, that what really mattered to the Congress was wherever there's a bipolar contest, Congress versus BJP straight fight, Congress party's strike rate was not that great in the last 2 elections. But this time, on a head-to-head, the Congress party did particularly well in states where there is a Congress-BJP contest. And Rajasthan is one of those states. So we have won 8 on our own ticket and 3 of our allies. So out of 25 seats, we have 11. And the new government was sworn in 5 months ago.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
exactly. So there has been a turnaround of sorts.
Indeed.
Could we have done better? Yes, but we got 0 last time, and time before that. So
Yeah.
it's like a few 1,000% increase to,
Indeed.
or maybe more. So it's, I think, a reflection of what we did right. And to my mind, what we did right was have good candidates. I've always argued for younger people contesting elections. So that, I think, helped us to a large extent. Our narrative, our campaign, our manifesto, our coming together. All leaders of the party work together to make sure that our candidates win. And in the heartland itself, so the BJP got very less numbers in Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest state.
Indeed.
So Samajwadi Party got 37 out of 80. We got 6. So that's a big climb down for the BJP. Haryana has 10 seats. We got 5 out of 10, the Congress Party. Rajasthan, we got 11 out of 25.
Indeed.
So these are the states, I think, where it really mattered as to what was happening. So Rajasthan has been a good example if we choose the right candidates, if we work hard, work unitedly, and we stick and stay focused to what our principal agenda was. It was about getting people of India a better life, getting a better blueprint for the next 5 years, and have a vision of what we want to deliver. If you recall, in the entire election, the Congress Party's manifesto was very clear. It was much in discussions because we promised some things. We promised a new legislation for minimum support price for crops. We said this whole recruitment of the armed forces should be done away with. We have a new scheme called Agniveer, which is not well received.
Yes.
So we had very important things, and we kept focusing. There were many times where the attempt was to distract the narrative into other things, about religion, about temples and mosques and so on and so forth. But I think we stuck to the course, and we wanted to talk about what was important to us and to the people of India. And I think the voters have rewarded us fairly.
So can I just ask about thinking about what India represents globally a little? The world has been talking about democratic backsliding and how that's happening everywhere, and perhaps no country embodies that more clearly than India, if for the reason that when India moves into a different category of democracy, so it moved under Modi's reign from democracy into this kind of hybrid territory, and that fully halved the number of people in the world living under a full democracy, right? So what happens in India domestically is incredibly consequential in its own terms, but it also embodies the modalities of what democratic backsliding in the rest of the world has looked like. Concentration of power in the executive, the diminution of civil liberties, the invocation of a kind of ethnic nationalism. These have happened in many places, but again, India embodies that. So now, we've had a incumbent government for the last 10 years that has now been checked, and checked, as you just said, in virtue of the realities on the ground. Will this new coalition government, what will it mean for the state of that backsliding? Do you think we're now, India's tomorrow going to be, or as we look forward in the next few years, going to be functioning the way that it did before 2014? Or are we likely to see the continued, for example, use of the Enforcement Directorate, the CBI, the kind of weaponization of the arms of the state to target politicians that are not in the coalition government? What do you think?
Okay, so I feel that the government in the last 8-10 years has certainly exercised the brute force of the state to demonize the opposition, to target leaders in the opposition, and to use those agencies and investigating agencies to create a sort of an atmosphere where doing an opposition leader as character assassination became pretty okay. And if you look at the pure data, the Enforcement Directorate, for example, all the cases, the registrations, the raids, the inquiries have happened. 96% of those people have been in the opposition camp, political parties, political leaders. So that can't be a coincidence. So misuse of agencies has been happening for a while, and the opposition has pushed back on it, and we've taken this to the people, and the people have spoken. Now, the Indian ecosystem, I think, is very, very robust. Frankly, I don't know how this government will function in the future. It's difficult to say. But what I can say is that we took these issues to the people of the country, and we asked voters to think about what should be done. Should there be a level playing field? And you talked about democracy. So India is a very robust, functional, dynamic, and interesting democracy. We're not the oldest, but certainly the most interesting, I can say proudly. And I say this because, having the right to cast a ballot is not democracy. There are many countries in the world where you cast your vote, but that does not signify a functional republic or a democracy. I won't take names. In many countries, you have people who cast votes, but I think what makes a democracy strong and transparent and resilient is the fact that you have institutions that back the democratic process. So conducting elections, casting a vote, electing a government, I think is only part democracy. What's real democracy is that people have the right to question. The parliament has debates and discussions and deliberations on a lot of laws that are passed. You have institutions that check the functioning of the government. You have watchdogs, you have oversight. You have constitutional institutions that for 70 years in India, no matter which party has been in government, we have tried to nurture those institutions. And any country that nurtures those independently functional institutions is a reflection of a healthy, strong democracy. And we have to preserve that. So when institutions come under question, or their credibility, or their functioning, or their transparency is under a question mark, that's not a good sign for the future. Yeah. So I think that last few years, we in the Congress party have talked about this. There was apprehensions amongst people that there may be some tweaking or changing of the constitution, some changes brought about. Again, this was all resonating from the soundboard of the ruling dispensation. There were all these talks. We didn't create those talks, but there were strong denials later by the top leadership of the BJP, and that I think was a necessity because they felt that people are fearing that there will be some changes to the affirmative action programs or to the constitution itself. But like I said, the people have seen that, they have absorbed those discussions and narratives and voted accordingly. So our agenda was that we must remain as strong, as vibrant, as transparent, and as credible a democracy as we have been, and nothing should come in the way of that. No leader, no party, no government. Because this country is much bigger and, it has much more to give. So people, parties, governments will come and go, but our country, our ethos of a democratic functionality is far more important than anything else. So I think that has to sustain. But yes, we in the Congress, we have much larger numbers. If you recall, in the last few years, there was one day that 147 members of parliament of the opposition were suspended in one day. It's never happened before. Now, and then bills were passed in the absence of those members of parliament. Of course, you can't question the speaker's rulings because that's how our law is, but it doesn't, the optics aren't that great. I don't think with a strong opposition of 235, 40 odd people in parliament, you can do that anymore. And you will have a strong voice. And I'm not saying as opposition, we have to oppose everything that any government does. No. But when we feel that something needs further clarification, further debate, further discussion, a rethink, for example. So the government last 8-10 years has been pretty one-sided. Decisions are made and people are informed. We had, our currency was banned on a whim. We had many other decisions made, without proper structural decision-making processes taken into consideration. So I think that should change no matter what happens in the future. But one thing we know this election has thrown out is that nobody can take the Indian electorate for granted. And anyone who tries to do that, Indian voters are ruthless. And they will go by what's important to us as a country and their right to elect those people who they will be serving for the next 5 years. So when you get elected, you're basically getting a license to serve the people for 5 years. And that's what it is. The competition is who can serve the people better. And I always believe that in public life, you have to have a debate and a discussion that is focused around the people. And this sort of confrontationalist attitude doesn't serve very well. You can be in opposition or government, doesn't matter. But the purpose that you're in parliament for is to serve the people. So what's happened last few years was a sort of a acrimonious attitude being created. It was an environment where it was sort of, overly boisterous. All those things, I think, will be tempered down. At least that's what I hope for in the future.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. This wisdom and the ruthlessness of the Indian electorate in terms of sending a clear message about what they want, I think has been one of the most heartening things of this election. And I think one of the points which has been made around a message coming from the electorate here is about welfare programs, right? That in a lot of states where Karnataka, for example, or UP as well, Andhra, where the incumbent governments have given a lot of resources in the form of welfare programs, right? That it hasn't necessarily served the ruling party, the governing parties in those states well. They haven't gotten a mandate to come back and govern. And the question is, what message does that send? That's one question. And related to that, you mentioned how the way you think what won the election for the India Alliance in Congress party in particular, in the case of Rajasthan, was that you stuck to your sort of, manifesto in terms of what are the issues that people are facing. And one of the things that has come up there is about jobs and the lack of jobs. And so I would like to ask a sort of a two-part question. One is, what do you see as strategies that can be followed, will be followed, should be followed, going forward in these next 5 years? And related to that, what would be your metrics of success? I ask that as somebody who's an economist and who has seen that a lot of sort of very, very important data, which India has had a long and historic tradition of doing excellently. Data gathering and national statistics have not happened in the usual way in the last several years. So
two things. One, my takeaway is that Indian people don't like lazy governments. You can't write a check and then hope to win elections. Mm-hmm. It's just like when you give someone a birthday gift. When you make something out of your love and effort, and that's much more valuable than giving a few dollars or a few pounds. So it has to be a bouquet of things. You have to have a government that is sensitive to the needs of the people who are not in the mainstream, and they need the helping hand, the budgetary allocation, the subsidies, the so-called handouts. That's important because you have to uplift those millions of people who are not in the mainstream. But giving something free itself has two problems. One, the delivery, if unchecked, is not satisfactory. B, you have to fix the leakages where they are in the system. And that alone per se will not suffice. Because people do need a good law and order. People do need a good environment where they can bring up their kids. They need opportunities of jobs. They need promise for the future. And India is a very aspirational country. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to be in a position to fulfill at least part of those dreams that people are thinking of and are pondering over. Because as the world gets more connected, Indian young people, the median age in India is 28 years. Okay? And out of 1.4 billion people, so many young people are now educated unemployed.
Yes.
It's about 40%. We have the highest recorded unemployment since independence. And that's not a good sign. No. So I think jobs has been a major factor and a major failure of the last 10 years of Indian government. Mm-hmm. So they have not really focused on, they've had growth, but I think it's been a jobless growth, right? So you had a lot of capital investments, the stock exchanges, and you have a few billionaires, every year propping up, but the real jobs are missing. Yeah. And that's a big problem. In terms of policy making, so every state in India has a different story. Mm-hmm. What happened in Orissa doesn't happen in Nagaland. What happens in Kashmir does not replicate itself in Kerala. So it's different political stories each side, but the large takeaway is that if you take a mind off what's important for people, if you're taking the voters for granted, if you're adopting policies those are strong arm policies, and you're not, taking people along, mm-hmm. You're not having discussions within the organization and within the government, that I think is not very welcomed by the people, by the voters. But I believe that when you make a policy, like you said, some state governments have been giving a lot of freebies and subsidies. It's important to do that because India is such a large country. A large section of India needs those targeted interventions. And the other point you made is about data. What we lack today is authentic data. We have not done the number crunching on the data because unless you have a full, tangible, verified data point, you can't create policies that are going to be effective. And even if you have made the policies, have made the allocations, there are outlays but no outcomes. So unless you have a matrix, you don't know how good your policies have been. Indeed. And unless you're able to self-check yourself, it'll go haywire. You become overly dependent on bureaucracy. So therefore, I think the last 5 years, we haven't had sufficient numbers on many of the data that we need to have. It's such a large country, and if we don't have authentic data, and government has actually shied away from sharing a lot of the data on unemployment, on poverty indices. In fact, the way to calculate poverty has been changed. Right?
Yes.
So that's a very easy way of saying I've lifted so many people out of poverty. I was in government with Dr. Manmohan Singh for about 5-8 years. And there we had every year systematic assessment and open declaration of numbers and data. So we actually lifted 150 million people out of abject poverty, and poverty was defined as a global definition. So today we have all sorts of claims, but no real data to back up those claims. The ultimate judge are the people. If those data that the BJP says were authentic data, and people were happy, and we are the third largest economy in the world, and everybody's happy, then the numbers would not be like this.
Sure.
Right? So they're giving 800 million people free food. The average per capita GDP, we are way below our neighborhood, China, for example. And unless we crack that per capita GDP income and wealth distribution in the way that's palatable to a large portion of India, we won't be doing justice. So India is such a large country that to grow at 6-7%, it'll happen automatically. Not automatically, but it'll happen. I think the trick is, can you be a government that can deliver a 9 or 10% growth rate? If you can do that consistently for a decade or more, then we are doing justice to the opportunity, because the potential we have is unmatched in terms of talent, in terms of age demographic dividend, in terms of natural resources. The geopolitical situation is such that people are looking at India for doing a lot more. And I think if we don't ready ourselves to punch above our weight, next 25 years, we'll be having a lot of problems, because India will age. We'll have a lot of burden on our shoulders for carrying, elderly people and social security issues, etc. So we should much really tap into what we have today as an advantage before it becomes a disadvantage.
So I'm conscious of the time, and we also want to take your questions. I'm going to throw in one more question, and then ask you to answer it very briefly. And then, Vinandi, I suggest that we prioritize, in the first instance, people in the room.
Yes.
I know we have a large audience online as well. Look, I think the question I want to ask you is about centralization of power, not in the BJP, but in Congress. So, I think there's been a very serious critique of the centralization of power in the Prime Minister's office. But under Congress governments, I think the very same charge has been levied at Congress governments. And that in particular, one of the reasons that Modi came to power, I think, so effectively in 2014 was on the back of a sense that Congress was led by a leader who, didn't come and by dint of hard work and of tapping into people's aspirations on the ground, but came through essentially having a family legacy and a family name. So, what are Congress's plans to change that in the years ahead?
Okay, so I think you're asking the question about the Congress's internal politics, how it works.
Yes.
Now, Mrs. Sonia Gandhi became Congress president in 1998. Right? We were in opposition, and Mr. Bajpayee was prime minister. She took it upon herself to stitch together an alliance that actually defeated Mr. Bajpayee, where at that point, if you recall, Maya, this India Shining slogan was so well marketed.
Yeah,
and
I
people
was
thought
thinking about that.
Mr. Bajpayee is going to come back to power no matter what happens. But it was a singular effort to stitch together an alliance, then come to power, and then not take power. So the party nominated Dr. Manmohan Singh to become our prime minister for 10 years.
Right.
She could have very well become prime minister in 2004. She chose not to do that. In fact, since 1989, no member of the Gandhi family has been a minister, a prime minister, or a chief minister. They've worked for the organization. And here is a family that a sitting prime minister was assassinated because she was fighting terrorists. Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated in the middle of elections. So to say that the contribution to the party and to the country is anything less than enormous would be injustice, one. Second, you see, we can choose to look at a situation either which way. So we won 2 elections, 2004, 2009, and we lost 2 elections, 14 and 19. So Mrs. Gandhi won us 2 elections. and we lost 2 after that. Again, this time, for the 3rd time, we didn't make it to power, but we gave a very spirited fight. A spirited fight where our back was to the wall, everything against us. The popular media, we had
funding issue.
Funding was a huge issue.
Yes.
We couldn't, one of our spokesmen was talking about, we couldn't hire planes and helicopters because, there was just absolutely severe crunch. And for a large country, and when you're battling, when you're taking on an opposition that is flush with funds, that has all the power in the world, you basically have a very uneven playing field. Despite that, and I think what Mr. Rahul Gandhi has done is that after having lost power, he took moral responsibility in 2019. He resigned from the post of president and has not taken that job, even though the party wanted him to take the job, because he felt that if I'm party president and we've done so bad, someone must take responsibility. Today we have an elected president, Mallikarjun Kharge. He's 80-something. He's had almost 5 decades of electoral politics, right? He's from the Dalit community. He's elected party president, and in the Congress party, every state capital, we keep a ballot box, we go and cast a vote, and thousands of delegates actually elected Mr. Kharge as a president. Now, does that happen in any other political party in India? Mr. Nadda was the party president. I don't know who elected him, who nominated him. No one knows. He got an extension. I don't know how he got that. And now seems like he's on his way out. And who the new person will be, no one knows.
Right.
So I'm saying is that in the Congress party, you can argue whichever way suits your purposes. But for my understanding, Mr. Rahul Gandhi took on a march across country.
Yeah.
It's a long march, 4,500 kilometers. He walked. And the only purpose was because there was so much disunity and there was so much acrimony and there was so much sort of, inhospitable environment for a lot of people in this country that he walked to get people together, to listen to them, to raise their issues, and to walk, and I did a lot of that walk with him. 4,500 kilometers is not an easy journey.
Yeah.
And he did that with the only purpose of connecting with the people.
Yeah.
Now that's sheer determination and hard work, and not many people anywhere in the world can actually do that. He did another yatra from Manipur to Mumbai. That was like a hybrid vehicle and walking. So to walk the length and breadth of this very large country, to meet millions of people, literally, to connect with them, to galvanize the support base, to not seek votes, but to say that we are here for you. That sort of endeared him to people across the country.
Yeah.
It helped the party, and we saw the results. Now we are 100 plus MPs in Parliament, where we were like 50 odd. So I think their contribution to building, sustaining the Congress party's prospects are second to none.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's our choice who we choose as a leader, right, in the party.
Correct.
And if that leader is sacrificing his or her position and making efforts to make the party grow in all parts, I think no one should have objection to that.
Right.
And in terms of power devolution, I must tell you from personal experience, in the Congress party, you can actually talk, disagree, and be okay with it.
Great.
I can't say the same about the BJP, but in the Congress party, you can have a difference of opinion. Your ideas are valued and respected, and you're not reprimanded later in time because of what you said.
Yeah.
So that openness of being able to air your views, to agree, disagree,
Yeah.
once we've had a discussion, we come to a conclusion by consensus, and we follow that decision.
Yeah.
But that openness of having the authority or the liberty to say what you want within the party. We had 2 years ago a Udaipur declaration in Rajasthan. We had a Congress party meeting where we decided that 50% of all positions in the party, all party positions, 50% will go to people who are below 50 years of age. It is a conscious decision because Indian demographic should be reflected in the political setup as well. Dalits, SC, STs, OBCs, women, minorities, they must all be given adequate representation in the party forum. That was a conscious decision the Congress party took. So there is an effort to get everybody on board. There is participation in decision making.
Yeah.
I know I said I should be short, but I had to elaborate because I thought.
Tough ask of any politician.
No, but I'm just saying because sometimes people misconstrued this
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think here's a family, and look at Priyanka Gandhi. She has actually worked so hard in this election.
Yeah.
Campaign, because when the candidates and the voters want you to
Yeah.
call a certain leader, it's an open choice.
Yeah.
They can call you, call me, but they want to call Rahul and Priyanka, so that's good, and it helps us win elections.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah. Let's
Go
I
to-
know you're on.
Yeah, I
on the
think, but let's
online.
start with,
So
there's a hand up there. And,
let's maybe start with our students since they, so why don't we start with two students back there?
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Super insightful, I must say. I have two very quick questions. The first one is to focus on the alliance, India alliance, and I'm more interested to know about the internal complexities and the power struggle within the alliance, and how are you coping in the India alliance? Yeah, India alliance, India alliance. And the second question is that in the UPA government as well, we have seen a lot of scams. We have seen the government using other government institutions for their own privilege and hiding of the scams. So there's a very thin line on how every government is using it. There's a trend of that. So how would you say, I was wondering like if you can share your thoughts on how can we curb that, and how to ensure that the government are doing their job effectively without using their power on the citizens or the opposition.
Okay, so we're going to take a couple of questions, and we'll keep track of them. Next, Nitin.
Thank you, sir, for your talk. Taking after Dr. Tudor's question, I think BJP is always ahead of Congress in setting the narrative. So with the new government coming, what are you doing to be ahead of narrative, especially of things like CA or the delimitation where they try to change the seat composition of North and South? So what is Congress doing to set the narrative where BJP seems to always take the lead nowadays?
Okay, can I do one more? And then, yeah, oh wait, okay. Can we
Okay.
prioritize our own
Sure,
students?
sure,
Yeah,
sure.
Roop is next, yeah.
Thank you so much for your insights, sir. My question is in terms of the issue you highlighted, the unemployment issue. What is the policy that sort of reverses that trends, and how does the alliance plan to push for that particular policy?
Start with her. You know, the India Alliance was a difficult one to put together, and there are two of our partners who actually went to the NDA. We fought elections against each other in the India Alliance, last 3, 4, 5 years. But we all decided that in the larger interest of having a united opposition, it's important for us to come together. And the issue, what brought us together, was the fact that the entire opposition got twice the number of votes than the BJP. And BJP always benefits from a fragmented opposition. It wasn't easy to seat space. It's to give one seat to another party, your rival within the state, it's very difficult. For example, Aam Aadmi Party, we didn't have an alliance in Punjab, but we had one in Delhi. Very complicated. Mamata Banerjee, she's part of India Alliance, but no seat sharing. So it's very complex, very difficult, because your state units will sometimes oppose it, and it's very, very difficult, trust me, because I've headed the state unit for many years. So it was difficult to come up with an alliance, but I think Mr. Kharge and Mr. Gandhi played a pivotal role in getting the India Alliance together. And I think it's here to stay, because now we have people have actually stamped it and said, this is a good idea, we're supporting you. The alliance has won many, many seats in Uttar Pradesh, for example, Akhilesh Yadav's party and Congress party. So when people have rewarded our decision, I see no reason why we should step back on it. Now we must be there inside of Parliament and outside to check, to oversee what the government is doing. And the other thing about what will happen, gentleman's question about policies of the next government, I think let them first handle Mr. Naidu and Mr. Nitish Kumar. They have been around the block many a time. So I think let them first go through with that. Because there's been a huge discussion about the delimitation process benefiting the northern states and not so much for the southern states, because the growth rates are different, population growth rates. So it's very difficult to say what will happen. There are legal provisions as to when the commission will get formed, but I would hold my thoughts till I see how the contours of the new coalition come about. We already had one or two parties who didn't take oath that day. I think Mr. Eknath Shinde's party didn't take oath with Mr. Modi, and even the other NCP also didn't take oath. So you'll have these, teething problems in the beginning, which are most likely to manifest into bigger issues as time goes by. So I think it'll be interesting to watch. But the opposition, as we have said in our manifesto, we are committed to what we speak of, and that will be our stand through the course of the next 4 or 5 years, or however long the government lasts. One does not know, because the numbers are stacked like this. If you think about it, 22 or maybe 2 dozen seats, if we're to shift from the NDA to India, we would have a different government. So it's actually much closer than what we think it is. 2 dozen seats, that's it.
Yeah.
Had to go from NDA to India, and we'd have a different government. So I think that reality check must be there in the hearts and minds of the people who have taken oath on, just recently. So we'll see what happens. In terms of, this last question about the jobs, that really is that's the responsibility of the government of the day. But I think state governments also have a role to play. So wherever we are in government, I have always advocated that everything else can wait. But people that when they get overaged for applying to government jobs. We have these paper leaks, this NEET issue just happened in India. It's a huge problem. So when young people's future is under question, I think no leader, no party, no government has a right to play with the future of young people. We must conduct elections in a transparent fashion. We must provide jobs. There are 30 lakh, 3 million backlog in government jobs, government of Central India. They should provide those jobs. And besides government jobs, unless you have a real job-oriented policy making in state governments to absorb young people from the farmland to the shop floor and to skilled labor, to higher education, the SMEs are the answer. Small and medium scale industry are the answer for getting rid of unemployment. All across the world, it's not the large corporations, it's a small SME sector that really employs tens of millions of people. And that's what we should focus on.
Nadia, I'm going to take another set of hands
Please.
in the room, and then we
Yeah,
can go
and
to
then
the
we can
online.
try one.
Anoushka.
Hi. So here at the NPP, we talk a lot about sort of unlikely coalitions, and the India Alliance is a pretty massive, fantastic, brilliant, but also unlikely coalition. And one of the
So do you think Mr. Naidu, who was in Delhi 8 months ago, protesting against the government of the day, and Mr. Nitish Kumar, who said, "I rather die than go with BJP," that's almost as unlikely as the India Alliance.
Mr. Nitish Kumar, I don't know what's happening there. I'm very interested in the coalition that comes into power right now. But just in terms of sort of larger questions of where we're hoping to take India, India the country and India the alliance, what are your thoughts about what kinds of ideologies need to be maintained for the alliance to be maintained? And hopefully, God willing, we manage to form government at some point. What then will be important for these coalitions to stay together? Because it is a set of very diverse actors with very diverse interests, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think, like I said, we may have some, this is a quick answer to her.
Okay.
We may have a small differences, but largely the reason why we are together remains the same. So the matrix is the same. We have an alliance which is against the NDA, and we've all come together, and people have rewarded our coming together. So I think we are here to stay. And like you said, I always say this, so today's opposition is tomorrow's government. Right? So
I agree with you, but the reason right now that the alliance is together is against the NDA, which is fantastic. Yeah. But once it forms government, what keeps it together, and how do we stay together as an alliance?
बनने दो, सब हो जाएगा, चिंता मत करो. Just wait for that.
Okay, so we have first here, Gargi, go next, yeah?
Yeah. First of all, congratulations for putting that alliance. Like, it was an exemplary thing to happen. Like, everybody in India was concerned about how is the opposition going to react, and how is the opposition was so fragmented, we were losing hopes, and democracy was like. So the way you have actually put up all the parties together, I just want to know your reflections on what special effort did you take for putting them together, and what was the tipping point really, which really made all the opposition to come together and forget their own differences and be there?
Hold your answer, we've got a couple of questions, yeah.
I would like to move away from the coalition for a bit and move towards something which is more sustainable. So as a democracy, we can only sustain ourselves if our institutions are strong enough. You're speaking about unemployment, you're speaking about all the other issues, even at the state level. But in the last 10 years, there's a lot of damage been done. There's not enough data. How do you, sitting in the opposition, now plan to strengthen our institutions and make sure that the entire decade of lost data is coming back to us? And with respect to coalitions, just a bit over there, we should also learn lessons from the past, right? We've seen Morarji Desai's government. They were all there, all thinking about they're going to stay, but lessons from the past shouldn't be forgotten. So how do you plan to learn from the past and then move to the future?
Great, and we'll take one more, but please keep it really brief. Yes, here.
So I have an interesting question. So I don't know whether everyone knows this or not. So in 2001, sir, opened a grill compound with my sister and sir's brother-in-law. Could you tell us about your experience running this?
Broad set of questions.
So just to add to that, I've had many hats before that. So I've worked in the BBC, I worked in a car company, General Motors, I did the food business for a bit, and then at a very appropriate age of 26, I became a member of Parliament. I gave everything up. For 20 years, been focused on that. But each of my stints, whether it's in journalism or in corporate sector, I've learned something. And I think my background. My father used to always insist that, because he didn't really have a splendid education, he was in the Air Force, but he always felt that, fame, fortune, positions will come and go, but a good education will be by your side, till you're alive. So he really focused on getting a good education, and I'm glad I had the good fortune to go and get those degrees. So that really helped me. That she asked a question about the scams. Miss, you asked about those things. Now in hindsight, right? So when we were in government, a lot of allegations were made. Just one, the Spectrum scam. Remember that scam? The numbers were like how many millions, tons of billions of dollars. BJP is at 10 years in government, right? What has been the conviction of that? There was a lot of propaganda, a lot of blame game, a lot of allegations. But if there was anybody at fault, and I'm open to all inquiries, right? For 10 years, you have space to conduct inquiries and punish people who were guilty. Nothing's come out of that. The CAG report, the Spectrum scam, and I'm sure if anyone does anything wrong, he or she should pay the price for it. But what happens is we get lost in rhetoric. So in 10 years, all the cases against, let's say, they've hauled Mr. Rahul Gandhi to the ED office. They've hauled Mrs. Sonia Gandhi for questioning. Now you do that because it makes headlines for 24 hours or 2 days. It remains in people's consciousness, but it doesn't lead to anything. So what happens, very easy to throw mud and run away, and then you've had full 10 years to prove that who's guilty, who's not. All those people who ran away from India, I won't take names, but who are living in this country and other countries, why haven't they been able to bring them back? All the black money that was abroad was supposed to come back to India. That hasn't come back. So I think we must, election speeches, rhetoric, and announcements versus what really has been on the ground. So it's very easy to say that, Dr. Manmohan Singh actually, to my mind, the most honest human being on the planet. And he actually took a strong stand. If anyone made an allegation, he said, no, until you clear your name, you must step down. Does the current government have the same morality? People in that government have done things that are unspeakable. And yet, no one resigns, no one takes responsibility, no one talks about it, no one gives the clarity, no agency has the guts to question those people. So you have to be even-handed in terms of how you view things and what you say and what you do. There was a minister in the UPA government whose son was, allegedly he mowed down people by his car, right? What happened to that case? There were women athletes who were sitting in Delhi protesting against molestation charges against a member of parliament of the BJP. What happened to that? His son got a ticket. So you can't have two standards, right? You have to be even-handed. And people of India, this whole temple talk happened so much. Ayodhya, BJP lost that election in that temple town. It's not about one religion or one temple or one constituency. I'm saying that the Indian voter is wise. They know what is right, what is wrong, much more than you and I. We all think we are smarter and we know what's going on. The political knowledge, the instinct, and the calculation of the Indian voter as a whole is, I think, by far higher than anyone I've ever seen. It's just phenomenal.
My question actually was that there is a trend that government is using other government institutions to either suppress the opposition or to hide their own scams. My question is that how do you ensure that this doesn't happen?
So there are processes for that. For example, the CAG report. There are committees in Parliament. There are many ways that you have the right to information. So you have a lot of ways you can get truth out. But the government, I think, is hesitant mostly to give data, to share information. The institutions, I keep saying, are one of the most important parts of our democracy, right? The stronger the institution. Look at our neighborhood. I mean, all of our neighborhood, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. Elections wahan par bhi hote hain, right? But the institutions aren't as strong as they are in India. That's why they're not as resilient. There are a lot of problems in their functioning of their democracy.
Maybe this connects to the other question,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, in terms of the,
So
that there has been a dilution.
So this election
of-
was actually fought on maintaining the credibility, the functionality, the transparency, and the appointment procedures of people who run those institutions, which are constitutional institutions. They're so important, and they have to be above board, and they need to maintain a certain independence. And we took this topic to the people, and I think people have spoken. They said, yes, this is true. You can't have a future time where these institutions are, made just rubber stamps or are ignored. So that's important, and I feel that it's one of the issues that the Congress Party, India Alliance, have taken up very, very strongly, and people have, accepted what we said.
I know we have a large online audience, so I would like to at least take one question from the online audience, and it's a topic that has not been covered explicitly so far. It is about institutions in some sense, but it's specifically about the media, so I'll read it out the question. Saying mainstream media, often referred to as the fourth estate, is perceived to lack neutrality during elections. If the media had provided more balanced coverage, the election results might have been different. What is your opinion on how the status quo of the fourth estate might evolve in the future, especially considering the pressures it faces, and what are the implications for democracy, which is already under stress?
So that's true. The Indian media has been biased, to say the least, and we all know that. But the flip side is now the Indian people are very smart. So this election was actually fought on Instagram and YouTube, a lot more than satellite television, because people understand that the news that comes in the evening is pretty much biased. But the media itself, I think, has been not as fair to the opposition as it ought to be. But I see green shoots. I see a change already happening because they're also pretty smart. They know which way the people have voted. So yes. I see green shoots in that. And I hope better sense will prevail, because the media is not just there to get TRPs and make money. They have a phenomenal responsibility of showing the truth, at least most of it anyway, and give a level playing field to all stakeholders in the election process. What really happened was that it was too skewed towards one side. And I think for media, what they've done is, for the Congress party, they put a whole lot of resources to damage the image of Mr. Rahul Gandhi. They put social media, and tons of people and money went in to kind of distort his image. And but I think when he started walking in the country, when he walked and met people directly, when we had social media and internet and other platforms to speak out, to converse, to engage, to connect, that really balanced things out. So people now, I think, have understood that what's coming on TV is coming on TV. It's just speaking at me. It's not really giving me an informed opinion or something that's tangible and I can take back home to my family and kids.
Can I suggest we do a quick last round?
Yes,
I know
indeed.
we're very close to time, and but really going to ask you to be extraordinarily brief. One question and very brief.
Sharp.
Yes? Can we start here?
So my question is about, like, again, the alliance and social issues. So even within a political party, like, it's a lot of people and not everybody has their own opinions, and not everybody has to agree on every opinion of the other person. And I find it very hard to believe that everybody agrees on it with everyone. So within the party line and in an alliance, this becomes more complicated. How do you support other members of your alliance when you don't agree with them yourself?
Okay, so how do you do that, right? Okay, right here.
Throughout your conversation, that you mentioned how, like, the ideology that the Indian electorate can be taken for granted has completely failed, and political pundits are saying that the Hindutva ideology has completely failed. But if you look at the popular vote, the BJP only got 0.8% of the popular vote. So doesn't this mean that the results we are seeing is just a byproduct of, like, the first past post system that we are using, and not like necessarily a policy or an ideology one?
So that comes both ways. In last 2019 election, the BJP polled 33% votes, and they got a huge majority, right? So that time they benefited from the first past the post. This time they were at loss. So it's even Stevens. So what happens is popular vote has reduced, but the number of MPs, members of parliament, they lost 70 odd, and we gained 60 odd. So that tells you something. So first past the post works both ways, advantage and disadvantage.
We'll take this question here. Very brief question.
Related to that question, last time, even when there was an alliance, it was seen that many regional parties just turned upon the Congress and fought elections against the Congress with Vidhan Sabha elections. So what would be put in place this time that the India Alliance, for all these Vidhan Sabha elections for the 5 years, or even less, as you said, does not turn against each other, and they still remain one cohesive alliance? Because Vidhan Sabha elections are a big thing then. And every party would want a good share of their power, a good share.
So second question on the kind of keeping the alliance together. Yes, right here.
Hi. While I'm all for a coalition and it kind of lets India take a step back from the kind of autocracy that we've been kind of told that we are for the past 10 years, but I have also seen that we see all of our MPs and MLAs spending a lot of time out of office trying to decide what coalition to join. Like, as you said, we're not sure what government is going to remain. So how do you think we can strike a balance between a coalition and say, like, having a stable government?
Another question about the coalition, but how to strike the balance. There was a question over here.
Yeah. Firstly, congratulations on the elections. I've never been relieved after seeing an electoral thing. So my question is, MP and Chhattisgarh also have similar realities when it comes to poverty. Why is it that the Congress was not, or the India Alliance wasn't able to do well? Secondly, we're a deeply polarized society right now. What do you plan to sort of bridge the gap? Because it's the poor and marginalized that honestly voted for the India Alliance, not the rich or the elite. So
Question
Great.
first.
Yes.
You know, I think when you say it's being polarized, I don't agree with completely. There are attempts to do that, but I believe 1.4 billion people in my country, in our country, are averse to polarization. Right? There's a cap, there's a limit to what percentage can be polarized. Indian voter, Indian citizen, inherently, through our historical 5,000 years history, has been accepting. That's what our religions, all of them, they say that we must accept and embrace everybody. Not, intolerance is different. I'll tolerate you. That's not nice. I have to accept you. Tolerating is like a sympathy, or I'm giving you some giveaway. Accepting your viewpoint. That's the ethos of our heritage for thousands of years. I think we live by that. It's not possible to polarize, no matter how much anyone tries to do. And I think what we need now is a healing touch where people are able to come together, put aside differences, and work towards the betterment of our country. Elections will happen every 5 years, we'll have elections. But people, society, young people's future is far more important. And the coalition, you asked questions about how are we going to navigate that. I'll be honest with you, it's never easy. But I think when we've come this far, we will go that much further. We will come together and figure out a way to tackle all those state level issues. And they happen, because if you're a regional party in UP, you want all the seats for yourself. National party is difficult to give it. So it's always a back and forth give and take, which has been the nature of the beast. All alliances are like that. But when the larger objective is in front of us, the smaller ones have to be taken care of. And if something is not, if I have a difference of opinion with you, if it's not a deal breaker, it's okay. It's okay to disagree. That's what you'll learn. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to differ from each other. It's okay to understand your point of view, not completely agree with it, but yet for the larger good of the country, work together. And that's the nature of politics that we must now practice in India, and that's what's required. Again, last point about this coalition, people are very concerned about, I think you should be more concerned about the ruling party coalition. We are in opposition, so we are going to, in the opposition, wait for our time, which may happen any time, we don't know, because both the alliance partners, Mr. Kumar and Mr. Naidu, have sort of a very love-hate relationship with the BJP. And frankly, no one knows what's going to happen. I don't want to sound tentative and say that we should have a weak government, but the BJP, I think in the recent past, has not been used to sharing power and to accommodate the viewpoints of important regional players. Time will tell what will happen, but recent history will tell you that it's not going to be easy. And that's bad news for the BJP and perhaps good news for the India Alliance.
We just had this question also about a comparison of MP and Chhattisgarh.
Yes, so there are some states where organizationally the Congress party needs to work hard. Because you can rightly ask, well, if you had good results in Haryana and Rajasthan, what about Madhya Pradesh? So Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, all these states we've not done well. But just to add, the vote share is still more than 40%. So it's the ruling government has used certain tactics to get to 10 out of 11 in Chhattisgarh, for example. Madhya Pradesh is a concern because we have a really robust organization, but perhaps not enough to get us past the winning margins in Madhya Pradesh. But I see it from a different point of view. Wherever we've not done well, I see potential. I believe that we have a lot of scope to improve. And we can do that because we have an organization, we have a history behind us. It's not a new arena or something that's really unknown to us. We will be able to build it, and we'll use this next few months and years to build the organization and get much better results in those states.
I think on that note, that optimistic note, and we wish that India continues always to have a robust opposition, because the wisdom of the Indian voter recognizes the value of that. And we hope that, whether it's the government in power or whether it's the opposition, that the country continues to be a bastion of democracy and does well economically and otherwise in the future. And personally, we wish you a very, very successful, upcoming 5 years and beyond. Thank you to all of us, all of you who have joined us today, and for all the people online. I know there, some of you online may have been disappointed that I cannot take more questions, and you have many interesting ones for Mr. Pilot, but I'm sure that he will give his response best in the actions that he takes over the next 5 years. So thank you all, and have a very good afternoon.
Thank you. New legislation for minimum support price for crops. We said this whole recruitment of the armed forces should be done away with. We have a new scheme called Agniveer, which is not well received.
Yes.
So we had very important things, and we kept focusing. There were many times where the attempt was to distract the narrative into other things, about religion, about temples and mosques and so on and so forth. But I think we stuck to the course, and we wanted to talk about what was important to us and to the people of India. And I think the voters have rewarded us fairly.
So can I just ask about thinking about what India represents globally a little? The world has been talking about democratic backsliding and how that's happening everywhere, and perhaps no country embodies that more clearly than India. If for the reason that when India moves into a different category of democracy, so it moved under Modi's reign from democracy into this kind of hybrid territory, and that fully halved the number of people in the world living under a full democracy, right? So what happens in India domestically is incredibly consequential in its own terms, but it also embodies the modalities of what democratic backsliding in the rest of the world has looked like. Concentration of power in the executive, the diminution of civil liberties, the invocation of a kind of ethnic nationalism. These have happened in many places, but again, India embodies that. So now, we've had a come into government for the last 10 years that has now been checked, and checked, as you just said, in virtue of the realities on the ground. Will this new coalition government, what will it mean for the state of that backsliding? Do you think we're now, India's tomorrow, going to be, or as we look forward in the next few years, going to be functioning the way that it did before 2014? Or are we likely to see the continued, for example, use of the Enforcement Directorate, the CBI, the kind of weaponization of the arms of the state to target politicians that are not in the coalition government? What do you think?
Okay, so I feel that the government in the last 8-10 years has certainly exercised the brute force of the state to demonize the opposition, to target leaders in the opposition, and to use those agencies and investigating agencies to create a sort of an atmosphere where doing an opposition leader as character assassination became pretty okay. And if you look at the pure data, the Enforcement Directorate, for example, all the cases, the registrations, the raids, the inquiries have happened. 96% of those people have been in the opposition camp, political parties, political leaders. So that can't be a coincidence. So misuse of agencies has been happening for a while, and the opposition has pushed back on it, and we've taken this to the people, and the people have spoken. Now, the Indian ecosystem, I think, is very, very robust. Frankly, I don't know how this government will function in the future. It's difficult to say. But what I can say is that we took these issues to the people of the country, and we asked voters to think about what should be done. Should there be a level playing field? And you talked about democracy. So India is a very robust, functional, dynamic, and interesting democracy. We're not the oldest, but certainly the most interesting, I can say proudly. And I say this because, having the right to cast a ballot is not democracy. There are many countries in the world where you cast your vote, but that does not signify a functional republic or a democracy. I won't take names, but in many countries you have people who cast votes. But I think what makes a democracy strong and transparent and resilient is the fact that you have institutions that back the democratic process. So conducting elections, casting a vote, electing a government, I think is only part democracy. What's real democracy is the people have the right to question. The parliament has debates and discussions and deliberations on a lot of laws that are passed. You have institutions that check the functioning of the government. You have watchdogs, you have oversight. You have constitutional institutions that for 70 years in India, no matter which party has been in government, we have tried to nurture those institutions. And any country that nurtures those independently functional institutions is a reflection of a healthy, strong democracy. And we have to preserve that. So when institutions come under question, or their credibility, or their functioning, or their transparency is under a question mark, that's not a good sign for the future.
Yeah.
So I think that last few years, we in the Congress party have talked about this. There was apprehensions amongst people that there may be some tweaking or changing of the constitution, some changes brought about. Again, this was all resonating from the soundboard of the ruling dispensation. There were all these talks. We didn't create those talks, but there were strong denials later by the top leadership of the BJP, and that I think was a necessity because they felt that people are fearing that there will be some changes to the affirmative action programs or to the constitution itself. But like I said, the people have seen that, they have absorbed those discussions and narratives and voted accordingly. So our agenda was that we must remain as strong, as vibrant, as transparent, and as credible a democracy as we have been, and nothing should come in the way of that. No leader, no party, no government. Because this country is much bigger and it has much more to give. So people, parties, governments will come and go, but our country, our ethos of a democratic functionality is far more important than anything else. So I think that has to sustain. But yes, we in the Congress, we have much larger numbers. If you recall, in the last few years, there was one day that 147 members of parliament of the opposition were suspended in one day. It's never happened before. Now, and then bills were passed in the absence of those members of parliament. Of course, you can't question the speaker's rulings because that's how our law is, but it doesn't, the optics aren't that great. I don't think with a strong opposition of 235, 40 odd people in parliament, you can do that anymore. And you will have a strong voice. And I'm not saying as opposition, we have to oppose everything that any government does. No. But when we feel that something needs further clarification, further debate, further discussion, a rethink, for example. So the government last 8-10 years has been pretty one-sided. Decisions are made and people are informed. We had, our currency was banned on a whim. We had many other decisions made, without proper structural decision-making processes taken into consideration. So I think that should change no matter what happens in the future. But one thing we know this election has thrown out is that nobody can take the Indian electorate for granted. And anyone who tries to do that, Indian voters are ruthless. And they will go by what's important to us as a country and their right to elect those people who they will be serving for the next 5 years. So when you get elected, you're basically getting a license to serve the people for 5 years. And that's what it is. The competition is who can serve the people better.